Hi clarinet friends, this is Lee Seidner talking about Clarinet Fundamentals, and the topic of this video is actually going to be hand position and technique. Finger technique is actually a fundamental skill that most students will be the first to say they feel frustrated by or they feel like they need more help with. I feel like everybody thinks that they can always play something a little bit faster, smoother, etc. Now, the key in building our finger technique actually lies in the way that we position our hands when playing the clarinet. We can't just rush in trying to play everything super fast because we can be doing so with a lot of tension, which might not feel awful in the moment, but can lead to some serious injuries and complications later on down the line. There are a lot of different ways that you can figure out the best hand position for you. The one that I personally like the best involves figuring out how to relax. Relaxing is the opposite of tension, so it's exactly what we want when we're trying to find an ideal hand position when playing the clarinet. So to find this hand position, we're actually going to start by shaking out our right hand. So you just let it go, shake that out, and let it fall to your side, really relaxed. No tension, you're not even thinking about it, you're just letting it hang down. Now, if you lift right from your elbow and you look at your hand, your wrist is a little low, but your natural hand position is actually a very small kind of V shape. It's not an arched U shape, it's this condensed V that is very relaxed and has no tension in it. Now, if we take that position in our right hand, we're just going to turn it and insert it to where the clarinet is. So if we take that shaken out hand and we just put our thumb, we're going to have our right thumb go diagonally to the left corner of the thumb rest. So it'll just go right here and kind of wedge itself right into place. So this makes the focal point to be right at about where the nail meets your finger. If your hands are a little bit bigger, then it's going to be a little bit past like mine is. Now, your right hand is actually going to angle up a little bit so that there is a contact point where at your second knuckle of your index finger is actually going to be touching this low side key here. And then each finger is just going to hover over the tone holes, and your pinky is going to have a contact point of either the C key or the E flat key, just depending on how big your hands are. Now, the left hand is a little bit easier. We shake it out, we lift it up, we see that beautiful relaxed V shape, and the thumb is going to go right on the tone hole, and if the back of your clarinet was a clock with the register key pointing up towards 12 o'clock, your thumb is actually going to angle at 1 o'clock. Now that angle is going to naturally bring an angle to your fingers as well, and you're going to have a few contact points that you'll want to make note of. Your index finger is going to have 2 contact points. On the second knuckle here, you're going to feel the G sharp key right underneath it for easy access, and then the third knuckle right here is going to have a contact point with the A key. Again, easy access so that we're not manipulating way too much to reach those throat tone keys. Your left hand pinky key is actually going to have a contact point that will vary depending on your hand size, just like the right hand pinky did. So it could be on the B key, it could be on the C key here, or even the C sharp key here if you have really small hands. Now, once our hands are in place, the thing that I want to make sure we take away at this point is that there is still flexibility in my wrists and in my fingers. Nothing is tense, everything is loose. I want you to think about if you've ever driven in an area that has a stoplight hanging from a metal post. When it's really windy or the weather's bad, you see the post kind of wave in the wind, which is a little concerning in the moment, but the reason that that happens is that the flexibility is actually what prevents the post from snapping when there's too much pressure on it. If it were really rigid and just staying in one place, if the weather got really intense, the post would actually break. The same thing applies to your wrists and your hands. If you're using too much tension and causing everything to be really rigid and applying pressure, that's actually going to cause injuries and not be healthy for you to continue on playing clarinet. So instead, you want to provide that flexibility in the wrist. Everything is loose, nothing is tense, so that as we're going through technical passages, everything is just happening with a flow. It doesn't feel forced. Now, when we move our fingers, we want to make sure that all of the motion comes from the back knuckle here, this first knuckle of every finger. So it's always just an upward motion. It's never a scooping motion. This helps everything be the most efficient it can be. The amount of pressure that we use to seal the clarinet when utilizing our technique, I like to describe as being the perfect hug. If you were to hug someone a little too tight, it would kind of be creepy, right? And if we squeeze the clarinet too tight, then we're applying way too much pressure, and that's going to lead to the injuries we've been talking about. If you don't hug someone firm enough, they kind of think you don't like them. And if you don't close any of these tone holes enough, then the notes are actually not going to speak. So we want that perfect in between where we can feel everything sealing, but we're not adding any additional pressure. One of the intimidating things about technique on the clarinet, which I totally understand, is just looking at it. You're like, there's so many keys, like what do I do with all of these keys? But they all are there for a very specific purpose and function to help us out as we're learning technical passages and having to navigate all of the music we learn. So the first set of fingerings that we're going to isolate are what we call chromatic fingerings. So we have this sliver key right down here, which we utilize to play B natural and also to play F sharp. So if we're going from B flat to B natural and we weren't using this sliver key, we would often get something that resulted like this. There's a really strong blip, as I like to call it, or like a bonus note that happens in between because we're having to flip fingers and it's really difficult to smooth that out. This sliver key allows it to be as smooth as it could possibly be. We don't have to flip at all. It's also a better quality sounding B natural, and the pitch is actually going to be a little bit more reliable as well. The same concept is applied just up the register with F to F sharp, and from D to D sharp in the altissimo. So this helps us avoid flips in any of those registers between those notes. The next chromatic fingering that we can utilize is the sliver key that's up here on the top joint, and it can be used to go from D to D sharp or E flat, and then additionally up the register it would be A to B flat. So these fingerings are utilized because in the chromatic scale, when we have to go up so rapidly, it keeps all of the motion in one hand. So instead of having to go from the D to the D sharp on here to the right and having to coordinate that motion here, we keep it all in one hand to make things as simple as possible. And then the third chromatic fingering that we're going to talk about is actually going from throat tone F to F sharp. So normally you'll see F sharp being played with just the first finger, which is a perfectly fine fingering. But if we're going back and forth between the two, we have that same kind of flip effect that we had from the B flat to the B natural. There's always going to be like kind of that extra blip, bonus note that happens when we do the fingering this way. So to alleviate this, we actually will just play F and add these two bottom side keys to get the F sharp. There's no blip, it's so easy to use, and it's extremely efficient. The keys that I want to talk about next that add to the busyness of the appearance of the clarinet are actually the pinky keys. So we have them on either side of the clarinet. We have the left side pinky keys over here, and we have the right side pinky keys over here. Now, the cool thing about these keys is actually that with just one exception, being the A flat or E flat key right here, they all have a parallel so that you can play that note on either the left or the right side. Now, why would we need that? It's so that we can alternate and appropriately get to all of the notes that we need to in technical passages without having to slide. So just like we're not going to want to flip, team no flip, we're also not going to want to slide, team no slide. So if we ever have a passage that goes from B to C, instead of having to keep everything in the left hand and going from B down to C here, or the right hand B to C here, you can alternate depending on what follows from right to left or left to right. So it's really just a matter of seeing what the sequence involves and figuring out what order of the pinkies will help you best succeed in that passage, and they're designed to help you do that. So when talking about technique, we obviously want to address crossing the break. Crossing the break is definitely one of the big developmental steps that we go through as clarinet players, but a lot of it involves our air, and the second half of that involves our fingers having to go everywhere. So instead of having all of the throat tones be open, like open G and just the A, just the A flat, just the B flat, you can actually use shading or resonance fingerings. But for these purposes, when talking about technique, you just want to make sure that you have your right hand down. You can have all three fingers down with the C key, and that really helps enable you to go over the break really efficiently, really easily, because you're having to move half the number of fingers you were before. So instead of having and having to bring everything down, we have our right hand down already. And we're just closing everything in our left hand. Again, it isolates the movement into just one hand, which makes our lives so much easier. Hopefully the information in this video has been extremely helpful in developing a proper hand position, playing with no tension, and getting a better idea of all of the keys that we have here on the clarinet. Keep working and happy practicing.